My organization is currently funding the work in the state of Hawaii to look at the impact of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls on Native Hawaiians. In their very first report, they found in one particular sting operation that of those who were online soliciting sex from an identified 13-year-old girl, 38% of those who were arrested as a result of that sting were active duty military. This is a crisis that we have to address, and it's one that's important to me. I was a young girl who was affected by this violence. I experienced sexual assault at the first age of 6. I attempted suicide for the very first time when I was 9 years old. The Creator must have had a plan for me because I don't know how I lived. In February, I sat in a room with other people in Alaska, and we talked about in that room about the active trafficking of young girls like me through the military bases in Alaska. And the reason I was part of that conversation is because I had been part of being victimized. And I remember being 16 years old, looking up on the wall of a barrack that I shouldn't have been in, and seeing my name written down along with other women that I knew, other girls. And I realized it was a list that this military man that I was with was making of the girls that he was victimizing, including myself, and he had written our names on the wall. We have to address what is going on in the Department of Defense, and we need to know. And right now, we don't know the baseline of what is happening. So what I am asking for is that we ask the military, and there is opportunity within the National Defense Authorization Act, for them to compile a report of currently available data on human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, and also homicide of both active duty military who are affected by this and those who are perpetrators in the active duty military. And we need to know what the impact is of the military on this crisis and of those active duty service members who deserve safety too.
And I'm not here just for every Native American girl. I'm here for everybody who has been through this injustice of murder, domestic violence, killings. So, I have a few names. If you can remember one and Google one, my job has been done today, because my point is that these people are humans. K. Sarah, K. Bonnie, Casey, Freeman, Leon, Thomasine, Preston, Claiborne, Selena, Tristan, Ashley, Cole, Willie. These are names I sat and wrote as I sit here. These aren't everybody I advocate. These are just the names that popped in my cloudy head right now, to remind myself this is why I'm here. And Shakaya Blue Harding is still missing. That's another thing. As her and her mom and another victim of her perpetrator, we tracked him down. We went on social media and found him when the Billings police told us they couldn't find him. We couldn't get him to speak up for Shakaya, but we got his DNA. We got them to test his DNA, and he popped hot on some rape kits, some backed up rape kits in the state of Montana. So he is in jail on rape, but he will not tell us where Shakaya Blue Harding is. And he was the last person with her. He was her boyfriend at the time, and she was hiding from him at the time. So all we can do is continue to talk about Shakaya, and if she's somewhere, let her know we won't give up on her.
I have a good friend of mine. Her name is Vanjie Randall. I knew her since high school. She had a son named Zachariah Juwan Shorty. Zach went missing in the midst of COVID, July 21st, 2020. When she reported the situation to Farmington, New Mexico, the Farmington Police Department, which borders the Navajo Nation, they told her that the Navajo Nation law enforcement would be taking the case. 4 days after she reported Zach missing, or she tried to report him missing, he was found dead in a field in Ninahanzad, New Mexico, on the Navajo Nation. The jurisdictional issues prevented the case from being properly investigated, and it also prevented the communication that was supposed to be going on between law enforcement and Miss Vanjie. Vanjie talks about her son all the time. She takes part in the MMIW marches. Zach was only 23 when he was murdered, and his murderer still walks free today. Vanjie says that she starts her day every day with a prayer, not to not to find the person who killed her son, but a prayer for herself and for those who are also experiencing MMIW. As with many nations and reservations, the Navajo Nation lacks the proper number of personnel to investigate crimes, and when someone goes missing, little to no resources are devoted to the case. And if there are resources that are available, it's only for the first few days that these resources are allowed to be used. The Navajo Nation is 27,000 square miles and has roughly 200,000 Navajos living on the Navajo Nation. Our nation spans across 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, and is the size of West Virginia. We are the largest tribe in the United States, and we have roughly 400,000 Navajo citizens who are registered as Navajos. The 2 major issues that hinder justice for missing, murdered, and deaf relatives on the Navajo Nation are jurisdictional lines that many families and relatives don't see, and non-communication and or miscommunication amongst law enforcement, and non-communication and or miscommunication with families. Invisible jurisdictional lines, you probably are asking, what is that? So let me explain. When crimes begin in towns that border the Navajo Nation, or sometimes they are sometimes passed along to the Navajo Nation law enforcement for jurisdictional reasons. Sadly, because the person is Navajo, it is sometimes assumed that Navajo will handle the case. In essence, the buck gets passed. And because the Navajo Nation lacks funding, has shortage of law enforcement, and faces recruitment and retention issues, cases go unresolved. They lose momentum, and cold cases become frozen cases in time. As time marches on, the communication stops, and everybody assumes that somebody is doing the work.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 2 in 5 American Indians and Alaska Native women are raped in their lifetime. Homicide is the number 3 leading cause of death for American Indians and Alaska Native females between the ages of 10 and 24, and the number 5 leading cause of death for 25 to 34-year-olds. 40% of all victims of sex trafficked are identified as American Indians and Alaska Native women. In 2023, over 5,800 American Indians and Alaska Native females were missing, and 74% were children. This is tragic and unacceptable. I even see this in my own home state of Idaho. The Idaho Missing Persons Clearinghouse 2023 reports that a total of 79 missing Native Americans, and the average rate of missing Indigenous people is almost 19 per 100,000 people. This is nearly double the rate for non-Native Americans in Idaho. Again, this is completely unacceptable, and I will continue to use my role in Congress to address this issue.
I want to begin by reading aloud some of the names of those who are currently missing. Paul Begay, who is a male Diné relative from Delcon, Arizona, who's the earliest known missing Diné man that we have in our records. He was last seen in California in 1972. Anna Curley, female Diné relative from Kayenta, Arizona, who is the earliest known missing woman we have in our records. Miss Curley was last seen in Kayenta, Arizona. Ella Mae Begay, an elderly Masani, who was a grandmother from Sweetwater, Tlaxcala, Arizona, who went missing June 15, 2021, which was the same day Renelle Bennett also went missing from the community that I represent in Shiprock. Everett Charlie was a classmate of mine who I remember danced to Michael Jackson in our first grade class. I didn't even know he was missing. These are a few of the names that I want to read aloud so they know they are not forgotten.